cat in the wall, eh? Okay, now you're talking my language.
Do you ever drunk Baileys from a shoe?
Oh, great. Thanks, Mother, for replacing the baby aspirin with LSD.
All right, welcome into the View from C-Deck, and it's time to look forward to the semifinals, baby. As how everybody predicted when the season started, the 4 conference champions, the 4 teams with a bye, all see ya, go home. We'll have to talk about that later. Is it a structural problem? Is it just happenstance this year? Is it a little bit of both? Maybe. But we're going to talk out here, of course, with the Buckeye-centric podcast, talking about Ohio State and Texas. We made a full podcast about this game, previewing it, so go check it out. But our real quick thoughts here. Buckeyes, 6-point favorites right now. Over under, 53.5? I think it's a close game early. You can hear all my thoughts on the other one, but I think it's a close game early. They're a good defense. They come out hot, but they're battered up a little bit. And they're going to have the home crowd behind them. It's going to be mostly Texas fans that are playing this game in Texas, and all the extra traveling everybody's being asked to do for this. It's just easier for them to fill it up. So I think it's like something like 14-10, 13-10 at halftime, but the Buckeyes make adjustments and ball out in the second half like they did in the regular season most of the time, not really in the playoff. And I'll take the Buckeyes 31-17 covering, but the under. 2 great defenses.
I was going to say about the exact same score for the first half. I was thinking like 17-10 or something. I see them keeping it close early, but then our defense just completely shuts them down in the second half. We might even shut them out in the second half. Kind of depends how the game's going. But my score was 27-13. I think our defense just basically takes the game over, and our offense does just enough to coast by because, like you said, Texas is a great defense. They're better than Oregon's, but I still think if we scored 35, I'm not going to be shocked. But I just don't see it happening today or in that game.
I'll stick with the trend of us blowing them out 38-21, getting the over, covering. I get, like, we called Oregon a great defense. We called Tennessee a great defense. And Texas didn't play the types of schedules that Oregon or Tennessee played. And the 2 games, like, they got smacked early against Georgia at home. The SEC title game, they couldn't stop a backup quarterback in the second half. So I don't know if the hype is real with their defense. They have legit dudes, I'm sure, but I think if we can come out early and smack them early, they'll probably fold and probably stop believing in themselves. And Arizona State, the more and more they pounded at them and, like, they hit trick play, like, they just weren't a disciplined defense in the end. And I think that might catch up to them.
Will be huge. Would be great, though, like Direwolf always says, to knock out the SEC before we even get to the damn title game would be a beautiful thing. All right, now we could go a little bit lengthier here to talk about the other game. Penn State and Notre Dame, 2 programs that have not won a national title since the 80s, 2 rabid fan bases, 2 traditional blue bloods, really. And then we end up with a traditional blue blood all Final Four, which is kind of, I think, what people kind of want, even if they say they don't. And all 4 teams end up started in the top, or ranked in the top 6, although seeded outside of the top 6. But this game should be a defensive battle. 2 really good defenses, 2 offenses that run the ball very well, but can struggle mightily in the passing game. Penn State's, I think they're both averaging like 4 yards an attempt for passing in the playoffs. Notre Dame just won the game with like 90 yards passing against Georgia, which is ridiculous. So I don't see how this game becomes super high scoring. Right now, Notre Dame's a 1.5-point favorite, though. This is in the Orange Bowl, by the way, 1.5-point favorite. It's an over under 46.5. I'm leaning towards Notre Dame, but I don't know. I don't love it. Penn State has the extra time off, but I trust Freeman. That 4th down play call where he switched his entire punt team out after running them out there with his offense and was able to draw Georgia off sides, although Georgia effed that up. They should have just did what people keep doing to us and slow roll their substitutions, and they would have had to call timeout. But anyway, he caught Kirby with his pants down, which is hard to do. And I've never seen Franklin come close to catching another coach with his pants down. So I'll take the Irish to just figure out a way to score some more points, because both teams are going to have to just try to figure it out, I think. And I'll take Notre Dame to win like 20-17 on a walk-off field goal. The under hits, though, for sure. That's my big bet. Already put money on it.
Yeah, I think the same thing with the low-scoring game. I see defenses dominating, and the key is going to be Franklin messing it up. They might even be up late in the game. I could see it being like 14-13 or something like that in the fourth quarter, and he does some stupid go for it on 4th and 1 from his own 30-yard line or something crazy like that. But I think Notre Dame pulls it out just because they do seem like a more complete team to me, even though both passing offenses are not good. But I do think Penn State seems to have a better passing offense. But I think Notre Dame's defense is better. So in the end, I think, it's going to be a tight ball game going into the fourth quarter, but then Franklin blows it. And it's like they give up a late field goal, like 16-14 maybe, Notre Dame.
And similar score. All right. Jason, what do you think?
These are two teams that I have not believed in all season long. Both, I've considered frauds at one point, and they have had arguably fraudulent paths to the semifinal. Neither one has really had to face a stiff test. I'm leaning more towards Penn State, although the Abdul Carter injury is big if he is going to play or not. I just think the Penn State passing game, I have more to believe in there, and I think Aller has gotten better, especially since the Big Ten title game. He has shown the ability to hit the deep ball. He's shown pretty good accuracy. So I'm going to lean more towards the passing game, because I think when you get into these situations where you become one-dimensional, you're going to have to rely on something that you're not good in to win these close games. Franklin worries me too. I just think I like the Penn State image, right? I like their team morale. I like their kind of, I don't know what you call it, their camaraderie. I like their kind of coming together at the right time, and they've got something going here. Penn State's, I think they win this fraudulent battle here. I think they win probably 29-26 was our score last time. I'll say they win 29-26 over Notre Dame that I picked.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State's forced 3 turnovers in the first playoff game, 4 in the second. Notre Dame does not turn it over because they just don't throw the ball ever, and they're very safe with the ball running it. I don't see Penn State. They're both teams struggle to score traditionally, but I just think there's more ways for Notre Dame to figure it out. All right. Well, real quick, we need to talk about the playoff as a whole. Now that we're through the first 2 rounds and now we're down to the semifinals and kind of arrived at where we've been the past 10 years before leading up to this. What do you guys think of the 12-team playoff so far? What do you think of the seedings? What do you think of, we talked about that. Really, we were way ahead of everybody. It's calling the 5 seed the best seed, which it clearly ended up being. 6 seed ended up being real easy too, but in terms of the rankings of the opponents versus their seeding, the 5 seed was the best, 6 seed was right behind it. What do you think can be done? Does anything need to be done as we watch all 4 teams that got byes lose in the first round? Is that a disadvantage? What are your guys' thoughts just overall after the first 8 games?
Overall, they got to change something, but I don't know how big of changes they can make with the contract and everything. I don't know what all they can do, but it seems like one thing that they definitely can do is make conference champions not get byes automatically, which I feel like that's the obvious thing. I'm okay with conference champions making it. That's fine. Automatic bids, whatever, but don't give them byes automatically. Give the byes, if there's going to be byes, to the top 4 ranked teams, period. That's how it should be, because then the matchups will be a lot better suited. The number 1 seed isn't going to have to play a freaking juggernaut in the first game. But I thought the same thing for us. We don't seem to play great. The first game of the season every year, we struggle. The first game after the bye in the regular season, we seem to struggle. So I didn't want the bye, to be honest. I wanted to stay hot, but then of course the scum game happened, so that didn't work out. But to me, I don't know if I know Jason would probably makes his ears bleed to say he wants more teams, but if you make it 16, then there's no byes, and you just simply rank them in order and still give conference champions bye or automatic bids, but just rank them in how they should be ranked.
Well, then you were completely making the conference championship almost a negative. You're playing an extra game, because we almost had a bye in the conference. We didn't play in the conference championship game. We came out against Tennessee, and it's we weren't missed a beat. It's it almost helped us. We got healthier in some regards. I don't mind the conference champions getting the bye. I think the seeding thing needs to maybe be adjusted, because I think you're always going to have blowouts. We've always had blowouts in ever since the playoffs been a thing. We've had blowouts in the semifinals, and we really have only had 2 championship games be watchable. All the other ones have been smacks. So I think the blowouts are inevitable. I think that the buys, I mean, Georgia backup quarterback, I think that was due. Boise State and Arizona State, you're just going to get those bad teams in there. And the Big 12 as a whole was bad. The ACC as a whole was bad. If we make the conference champions not get those buys, then you're just going to have the SEC and Big 10 just get these buys. And you're never going to get this influx of talent to the other conferences. And I mean, that's what we're looking for anyways, getting this super conference. More teams is just going to make it a worse product, in my opinion. We're getting teams like Clemson in. I've never liked 12 teams. If I was Supreme Chancellor, I would make the BCS system back in play.
Like one team versus one team at the end?
No, yeah, just give me the top 2 teams at the end.
No. Because you can't, there's too many years that would be just such a cluster like it was then. Because who's the top 2 teams? We don't know. Because right now, the best team in the country is Ohio State. And we were the 8 seed. And we were the number 6 team in the country. But we are clearly the best. So clearly we did need to expand it. Like how many, like 2015 Ohio State, 2023 Georgia. Very well could have been the best team in the country and didn't get a chance to prove it because we met, weird regular season games that didn't matter. I don't think this year proved anything conclusively yet because it was a weird year. This is kind of like 2007 where it's like we are almost like that LSU team that year that lost to their rival, Arkansas, that they shouldn't have lost 2 games in the regular season, but everybody kind of thought they were the best team the whole year. And I think a lot of people have thought that about us this year. And then they came and just beat our fucking brains in the national championship game. I think that's kind of like what's happening here. It's just a weird year like 2007, and we don't have like true dominant teams. Besides, and like the best team just had weird games and lost, and that's us. So I don't know that there's a huge like Boise State outgained Penn State, Arizona State outgained Texas, and Notre Dame was outgained by Georgia. So it's not like the scores were bad, but there were some weird things that happened in those games to make them worse. And actually, the Texas game wasn't. Like the only one that was really bad was Oregon, which nobody saw that coming. So I'm ready to give it another year. I do think it was right to expand it. I think 8 is the real number, though, as we just saw. The 4 finalists who all won pretty convincingly to get there are all in the top 6. And I think that's where it kind of ends of like who can actually win a national championship. Because once you get past that, you're getting teams that either have like severe roster problems or like just had severely flawed teams that just are going to find a way to lose to get before you get to the semis even. And but I don't know what we do to fix it quite yet besides maybe next year try to reseed after the first round. But it doesn't seem to even matter because it went chalk anyway. It's a reseeding wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I mean, any time with this type of thing, people tend to overreact, and I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, it's the first freaking season of it. Who knows? An outlier, and next year, the 3rd or 4th ranked conference champion is actually really good. I mean, I don't know, or maybe the buys actually help because teams needed rest because of injuries or whatever, and this year, like. Oregon was kind of an outlier too because they had a bye in like week 11 or whatever week that was right before their last game. So they had played like 2 games in a month and a half. That was like extra rust. So
very well could have been a problem for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of called that a little bit. I mean, the way we came out against Tennessee and they've been rusty. They've been sitting there for a month, and if we came out fast, it's game over, and that's pretty much what happened. But I mean, you got to say a bye's an advantage, right? Because you don't have to play. You're automatically in the freaking next round. So I don't know. I've always been kind of warm, like don't know, middle of the road on what I feel about buys. It seems like it's like that in the NFL too.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the Saban always talks about like how we're comparing these teams on unbalanced. Like everybody plays a different schedule, with different scheduling requirements per conference. So like nobody's on a level playing field. So I think that would be what you address first. Everybody playing the same amount of conference games. Everybody like, I think divisions in the conferences, like, because you're in these conferences in the SEC, but not every team's playing each other. And I don't see how you can compare teams in the same conference that play different schedules now, where when you had divisions, you can kind of say, okay, that's a good division. That team came out of that division. Now it's like, okay, these 2 teams came out of the conference, but Neither one of them played the best, like Penn State. Like they didn't play the great teams other than Ohio State. And here they are in the Final Four. So it's tough to kind of judge these teams in the end. And we can say we got it right with SMU because Alabama lost and South Carolina lost. But then here's Ole Miss blowing the brakes off Duke. And everybody said all year long, Ole Miss probably had one of the most talented rosters in the league, but they fell 3 times, so they didn't deserve to be in. But I think that's Saban. I think if there is a commissioner, he needs to be it. And we need to adjust the scheduling thing and put everybody on the level playing ground.
I think if there's a commissioner, it needs to be me. I do agree totally, though, about making it level. I've thought that for years. It pisses me off to no end that the ACC and SEC play 8 conference games and 4 non-conference, and then have the audacity, especially the SEC, to bitch about scheduling. I'm like, hello, like Bama, I'll give them credit. They're going to play 10 P5 teams next year. But if you only play 9 and everybody else is playing 10, what are you complaining about your freaking conference schedule?
Yeah,
it's just stupid. Or P4, whatever nowadays.
Georgia can't be too pissed because they just laid an egg, but they beat Texas 2 times. What if Texas wins the whole thing and they're like, what the hell? We beat these chumps 2 times.
I know. I mean, I saw that joke made several times. Like, oh, what the F is this?
Yeah.
I guess the biggest problem is the 5 seed and 6 seed potentially getting the kind of matchups they got this year, where they're just statistically is more likely for them to make it to the semis than the 1 and 2 seeds because of who they play. If you use like any sort of analytical model, it's going to tell you that they have a better odds of winning those 2 games versus the other team of winning that 1 game. And that's problematic. But like I said, this is 1 year. Maybe like you said, or I think Jason just said, maybe the 3 seed is really good next year. Maybe the 4 seed's really good next year. Like, you just never know. Us losing really screwed up the bracket too, to be honest. Like, we should not have been the 8 seed. We should not have lost to Michigan. We screwed that up. Sorry. That's our fault.
They're never going to do it because of the money. But if they made the second round also home playoff games, that would be where, okay, you can leave the seeding how it is. Oregon, Ohio State at home. Who the fuck knows what happens if we have to go back out there? They have the home stadium. They're never going to do it. But I like that. I like having like 2 bowl games being rotated in every year rather than we're playing all 6 basically every year. They're never going to do it, but that would be, in my mind, the simplest way of keeping it how it is. Let's just make it home games.
I agree with that. But it's not because of the money. It's because the rubbing the back and stroking the dick of each other that the bowl committees do with the executives, the commissioners, the ADs. Go ahead, though.
Yeah. That was one of the big reasons why I was saying the 5 seed was the best too, because you get to host a freaking game, and then you're hosting it, so odds are you're gonna
worst team in the playoff. You're hosting the worst team in the playoff.
Yeah, you're hosting the worst team, so you're gonna win. 8 or 9 out of 10 times, you would think, because if you're the 5 seed, you might be the second best team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They're hosting them. They're sitting at home. Wouldn't you want to freaking host a playoff game if you're a top 4 team, but you don't get to? That just never made sense to me. Like, I thought for sure the second round should be home games too.
I thought for sure they'd go to 8 teams first before they went to 12, and here we are though.
Yeah.
One last item. Obviously, the targeting call that was not called in the Arizona State game that was end up being huge is a point of emphasis. If you're an Ohio State fan, we've talked a lot about the holding calls and lack thereof. Spoiler alert, Ohio State's opponents have not been flagged for a holding call in 12 games. 12 games somehow. That is not possible, period. As the old saying goes, you can call holding on every play, and yet somehow our opponents have not held us in 12 entire effing games. That's ridiculous. But we've talked about it before, though. I don't think it's a conspiracy. They don't call holding anymore in college football. And now this targeting stuff has always been like, what the hell's going on? And actually, I kind of agree with how it's being called now, where they're just not generally calling it. But do you think these officials could very well swing these games? Does anything need to be done about this? Would you like to see more holding calls called? You have to start calling. Like Jack Sawyer on Oregon's last touchdown, it was irrelevant, but he's getting held for like 3 seconds there, right in front of the ref. It's right in front of Gabriel, so the ref's looking right at it.
I've been screaming about it for the last few weeks about the holding, but to kind of contradict myself a little bit, I'd much more well, for targeting anyway. I'd much more like that they don't call it, because that can change the freaking game. You eject, like in 2019.
We saw that.
Yeah, completely flipped the freaking game on its head. They had all the momentum after that. So I just wish, I mean, like you said, what they were talking about on the fan is they're less likely to call it now because they don't want to eject players. We'll take that out of the freaking rule and still call it because it's illegal, and call the penalty, personal foul. He's not ejected. Then it doesn't completely change the outcome of the game anymore. That's just make that little tweak. But as far as holding, I mean, if they're not going to call it, then freaking tackle people. I mean, you do it until they call it. I mean, why not?
Lathan Ransom got wrapped up around the waist by a running back on a blitz. He ended up getting the sack anyway, but he got wrapped up around the waist, and they did not call it. And it's in the backfield by themselves on a blitz. Like,
yeah, I've always been like Cleveland Browns fan. Like, Jesus, we've been on our fair share of bad calls by the refs. But I tend to think most times the best team wins, regardless of the refs. And if it comes down to one call that you're bitching about, then you probably didn't deserve to win the game anyway. So if they're not going to call it, just let them fucking play at the end of the game. Just like in basketball, like you could make basketball an unwatchable sport if you call fouls on every play like the NBA is doing right now. But same thing with college football. We've seen games where it's like, Jesus, there's 10 flags in the first half, and these games are already lasting 4 hours. So I've never loved these long football games. I'm going to always say, just don't throw the flag. That's my opinion. I can see more holding calls needing to be called to kind of clean up the sport, but I don't know.
I mean, holding can be a dangerous play too. Like, the one that we did get called on us was with Will Kaczmarek taking the guy down on like basically a tackle. Like, that's dangerous play too. Like, to be tackling a guy trying to pass rush because they're not expecting it either to get like yanked down like that. That's some Draymond Green bullshit to go to your basketball thing. But yeah, I guess I'm fine with them as long as it's both ways. As long as it's both ways where you're just not calling holding, it is what it is. And now it negates a great pass rush for us, although we end up with 8 sacks, so I guess you can't say too much. But that it does help negate the great pass rush if you don't call holding. So I guess it's advantageous than teams with lesser offensive lines. But I think it's also like all these games are blowouts. They don't want to throw a bunch of flags in a blowout either.
Yeah. That's true. It's just more frustrating because it seems like, I mean, that was the one you just gave an example for because it got the sack is not what I'm about to say, but it seems like every time a holding should be called that we see it so blatant, they get a huge freaking play off of it. So it's just so infuriating because it goes from a 10-yard loss to a 30-yard gain. Like it's so massive.
And then we'll see a hold called that's like 5 yards behind the play and it's already over.
Yep.
Of course, not in our games because our opponents still, that was 3 penalties on them. So what are our opponents averaging? Like 3.5 penalties a freaking game. We play the most disciplined schedule in the country. What can I say? All right, but enough bitching about that. I also say this has been really fun though. Maybe because we're kicking ass, it's fun, but I think it's really fun to have these interesting matchups. Penn State and Notre Dame now for the first time in over 20 years. Us in Texas for the first time in 17, only the 4th time ever. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun. And both these games, I think, should be pretty competitive, at least for a half. But right now, Ohio State just looks like the team to beat. Just steamrolling very good teams, 2 top 7 teams, including the number 1 team in the country by 20. So for the Hosto and the Direwolf, I'm just Matt. Like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you think about the refs, tell us what you think about the games, and enjoy everything. 2 more weeks, 2 bonus games now. I guess 3 bonus games total for everybody. Can't wait to watch them. And we will see you guys next time.
Hey, guys. Whoa, big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later.